Good morning guys, how's it going? Jim here, Scottish guy in Moscow. We're taking a walk today and we're going to talk about the 5 things I've learned from living in Russia for 3 years. If you're just catching up on the channel, as I know there's a lot of first time viewers lately. My name's Jim. I was living and working in Moscow for around 3 years. I've just left, moving on with my life. But I wanted to point out 5 things that I've learned. Let's get right into it. Please subscribe to the channel, helps me out. Here we go. Number 1 is flowers. Now I'm going to preface this by saying most of these things that I'm about to talk about are things that I already did or already knew about. It's not like these are all new concepts, but the importance that is placed upon them and the way that I've seen these things in society makes it so much more important. Okay, back to number 1, flowers. What do I mean by that? Guys, if you're a man, you absolutely have to, there we have some there, you got to be buying more flowers. This is where Russians put us all to shame. Now, flowers in Scotland, of course we buy them. We have florists. We buy them for a wife or a girlfriend when we've done something wrong. We buy them for our mother on Mother's Day. And you buy them on Valentine's Day and things like that. But we don't buy anywhere near enough flowers. On every street, on every block in Moscow, probably the rest of Russia, but I've never seen the rest of Russia, you're going to see Sveti shops. Quite common, Sveti 24 часов. Flowers 24 hours a day. Can you imagine that? Flowers 24 hours a day. You've got to be buying, I think if you're in a relationship, you've got to be buying flowers at least once a week. Doesn't mean it needs to be the most expensive flowers, the most expensive bouquet. Thought somebody was coming up behind me there. But you've got to be buying more flowers. It should be a normal gesture between a man and a woman, whether it's for your mother, whether it's for your girlfriend, your wife, your daughter, whoever it's for, we got to be buying more flowers. That is one thing that I really, really respected about the Russians and their culture. The amount of flowers that are exchanged, because it is a gesture of romance, kindness, love. But of course there's lots of rules around flowers in Russian and Slavic, I'd imagine, culture. I can't remember them all, but I do remember that you can't give an even number of flowers. You can't give yellow flowers. Yellow flowers apparently, again, correct me in the comments below, you give yellow flowers to someone if you're breaking up with them. Is that correct? Have I got that one right? So apparently, in Slavic culture, if you're breaking up with someone, you give them yellow flowers. So, obviously you can imagine as a woman, you probably don't want to receive yellow flowers. Men, you don't really want to be buying yellow flowers. But you've got to make sure you're buying more flowers, Sveti, for your loved ones. Right, let's move on to our next point. The next one on the list, number 2, I've got it on my phone because I thought about this before we started. Directness over politeness. Now I'm Scottish, but by proxy, being Scottish means you're British. Means you've got a very close relation to the English. And what are English people known for? Their politeness. Politeness over everything else. Now that means politeness to your face. Of course, what happens in English, British culture, people say what they want to say behind closed doors, but to your face, they are somewhat more polite than anywhere else. But politeness to a fault. Politeness to when the waiter comes round and you don't like your food and they ask you how's your food. British people say that they like it. They go, yes, oh, it's lovely, fantastic, thank you. But really they don't like it, and as soon as the waiter goes away, they're just like, nah, I don't really like this place, maybe we won't come back. That is just one example. That is one example of how people are sort of too polite. British people don't want to inconvenience anybody else. I think Americans take it to another level where everybody's like, they're just like, it's as if, check this car out, what happened to that? Looks like somebody's threw a boulder on top of it, or that's someone's head that's hit that. Moving on, right, so Americans, from what I see from the outside of American culture, it's sort of like they're too over the top. It's like everything's amazing, everyone's your friend, and British people don't have that as much. It's sort of more subdued, but it is polite nonetheless. But what do Russians have? Russian people have, over any type of politeness, is just direct honesty. If you ask someone if they like something, they'll tell you. If you ask someone if they want to do something, go somewhere, they'll tell you. They won't spare your feelings. But at first, as an outsider, when you come into this, it can take you back a bit, because you're not used to people being so direct. People actually telling you the truth, people actually saying what they think. But once you get used to it, and this is something I'm going to take, I was never like overly polite myself. I was always somewhat direct, but I've learned a lot from Russians, and I really love how direct people are, how much they say exactly what they're thinking, but also no one's offended by that. Now, if you take that back into Western culture and you just start being completely direct with people, I think people might think you're a little bit rude. And I think that's how maybe Russians have the stereotype of not smiling, of being quite cold. But that also comes from not smiling for no reason. Not smiling just because someone smiled at you. Which I don't know, I quite like the smiling thing. I don't know if I want to go as far as never smiling, unless there's an absolute reason to do so, because sometimes I think it is a nice thing to do. But the directness and speaking your mind, I do love. And I do love that how Russians are not easily offended, and they sort of, keep their business to themselves. But if you ask them something directly, then they will tell you. All right, guys, let's move on to number 3 on the list. What have we got? Right, here's a big one. And this is something I kind of already did, but not to the level of Russian people. And it's something that I will always take forward. Now, it's sort of in 2 parts, but I guess it's got to do with cleanliness. Now, I would always wash my hands before I eat. Always. Wash your hands after you go to the toilet, these type of things. But Russian people, as soon as they enter a house or a building, they will wash their hands. Now, not every Russian. If you know my friend Arisha in Russia, Arena, she doesn't. But she's the only one, she's the exception. But as soon as you enter your home, guys, in the comments, if you're not from Russia and you're watching this from another country, do you wash your hands as soon as you enter your house before you do anything else? I've got to be honest, before spending time in Russia, probably not. Obviously, if my hands were dirty, I would clean them. Before I ate, after you go to the toilet, all these things, these times where you would normally clean your hands, but I would not wash my hands as soon as I enter my home. But since living in Russia and seeing other people do it, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. You've been outside, you've been shopping, you've touched a lot of stuff that a lot of other people have touched, and you come into your own home, so why do you want to start touching it? I know for a fact, so maybe people in the comments, everybody's going to tell me that they do this, but I know for a fact that not everybody does this. Definitely not. But it's something that I will always do moving forward. As soon as I come home, I wash my hands. Also, the no shoes inside. Well, I've always been, growing up, my family were a no shoes indoors family, but I don't think it was across the board for my culture that people would always take their shoes off. Now, Russians can sometimes go a bit far with those little plastic foot protectors. It's like having a little, like the type of bag that you put your vegetables in at the supermarket on your feet. They've got them everywhere. Sometimes I feel like that's a little bit excessive, but I am a big fan of the shoes off indoors. It was something that I already did, but I love that how in Russian culture, it's like one of the biggest sins you can commit to have. Check it out, Ginger Cat, Ginger YouTuber. It's one of the biggest sins you can commit to have the shoes on indoors, to walk anywhere past the little entrance of your house, of your apartment. And also when you go to things like, so when Russians go to the gym, go to any sort of hospital, you know, go see the doctor, anything like that, when you're walking through the corridors of these places, often, almost always, people will put those little foot covers on. Sometimes I think it can be a little bit excessive, but it's always better to be more clean than less clean, isn't it? Right, let's move on to are we at number 4 now? Let's go. Let's have a look. Right, number 4. Well, it's something that I've learned, something that I respect. There's not really much I can do about it in terms of having any say over this, but indoor heating for apartments is almost like a public service in Russia. People do pay for it, but the payment for it is so low that, yeah, okay, if you're, let's cross over and go into this park. Okay, if you're older and you're on a pension, then of course you're probably going to notice the difference in cost between summer and winter for your heating. But if you've got any way of a decent salary, then I'm being honest, you barely notice it. When it's minus 25 degrees outside, every Russian apartment, every Russian building, etc., is so hot. I mean, a lot of the times during winter, I had to open my window because it was too hot, to let some cold air in to cool myself down, because it's difficult to sleep when it's too hot. And that is when we're talking like minus 20, minus 25 outside. And the way that it works, I mean, I'm not a heating engineer, but I'll try and explain it to you, is I guess the hot water that goes into the radiators is just piped through the whole building, the whole apartment block. And you can turn it off, I guess, but you can't turn it on. Again, maybe somebody explain this better than me. So the heating will come on once the weather starts to get cold, usually around about October, November probably, I'd imagine. And then that's your heating on all the way through for about 6 months until it starts to get warm again. And you go outside and it's absolutely freezing, but you always come back to a nice warm house. Let's compare this to the UK, where, well, for example, more people live in houses in the UK than apartments, but everyone has their own individual boiler, which you switch on to boil the water that goes through the heating, or worse still, you have electric heaters or storage heaters, but it costs an absolute fortune. So you've got people who have maybe worked their whole life and they're now on a pension, and they've got to sparingly put on the radiators. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't get anywhere near as cold in the UK as it does in Russia. It'll go to minus sometimes, but not for very long. But the point being is that heating seems to be more of a public service, shall we say, for people as they need it. I mean, obviously it's an absolute requirement, and you couldn't have people, especially older people, not being able to put the radiators on. But obviously there's, you know, the UK, it's a capitalist society. There's a lot of people, or maybe not a lot of people, but there's people that own the companies, the energy companies, that are making an absolute fortune. Could we be doing something, especially in Scotland, when we've got all that oil in the North Sea, all those wind turbines as well? Is there something that we could be doing to help the people, especially the people that need it the most? because that is one of the biggest payments that you're going to have in the UK is your energy prices, paying for your heating, electricity, whereas in Russia it's extremely cheap. I think it's even cheap for Russians. They can, you know what I'm talking about, like the average Russian, someone on a pension, etc. Right, we've got one more. This one's going to apply to Moscow. Maybe it doesn't apply to the rest of Russia, but if I compare Moscow to my capital city of Edinburgh, or London, or other capital cities that I've been in, one thing that I've learned and respect from Russia, but Moscow especially, is the perfection of public transport. The low cost of public transport. You get your Troika card if you need to travel throughout the city over a month, and you can then go, I can't remember how much it cost. When I was getting it a couple of years ago, it was about 2,800 rubles, so that was about £28. It's probably more now, as everything always goes up. But you've got a metro every minute during rush hour, every 2 minutes. The buses, they're clean, they're safe. I don't really know why other capital cities can't quite replicate this. I can barely talk today. I've not had a coffee yet. That's why I'm struggling with my words. But I'm not sure why other capital cities can't quite replicate the low cost, the ease in which you can move from one to the other, how regular they are, etc. Some people say that Moscow, and again, you can correct me in the comments because I've never been throughout the whole of Russia. Obviously, Moscow has a lot more money spent on it. That's probably obvious, but maybe other people in the comments can explain that further. So obviously, Moscow's got the best services, but that really goes for any country where the capital city seems to have the best services, the most stuff. But the way in which the ease and the perfection of the public transport, the safety, the cleanliness, how it's signposted, how it's colour-coded, everything is made easy, even if you don't speak the language, where you can move throughout the city, wherever it is that you're trying to get to, and again, going through the city centre, the metro's so much quicker than just even taking a taxi. And I just think that definitely other capital cities, I know it's never going to be like that for every city in every country, it's just not possible, but other capital cities could really look at that and say, why can we not make it like that? If you know of another capital city with as good or better public transport, tell me in the comments, because I'd love to know about it. Moscow is by far the best that I've seen, but I do understand that a lot of money is spent in Moscow compared to the rest of the country. People tell me it in the comments all the time, but I just didn't really get out of Moscow much because I loved living there so much and enjoyed my life. So other than going to St. Petersburg once and Nizhny Novgorod once, then I pretty much spent my whole time there. But that was my channel, that was my life and all the rest of it, and I loved it. So that is definitely one of the things that I've learned. And there's not much thing that I can do about it, but in terms of public transport in other cities, but maybe one day some other capital cities, like London for example, could catch up. So let's recap. Number 1 was the importance of buying flowers. Number 2 was directness over politeness. Number 3 was the no shoes indoors and washing hands. How strict it is and how embedded it is in the culture. I love it. Number 4 was heating as a public service, meaning that should private companies been profiting so wildly off of this when it's basically a necessity. I'm not saying they can't make profit, but how much is enough? When is enough in terms of costs of heating, especially for old people? And the last one is perfection of public transport, in Moscow at least. Alright guys, as always, let me know what you think in the comments. If you've watched this right to the end, I'm going to be moving on to Istanbul next week. Then I'll be back in Scotland for an undefined amount of time, definitely throughout the summer. Then I'm pretty sure I'll be somewhere else. Thank you very much for watching. Leave a comment or a question in the comments, have a discussion about anything I've spoke about. See you next time.